I am super excited today because we have my dear friend Victoria Thompson. Victoria, we met a long time ago. I mean, gosh, you are at CDW now as an instructional designer, but you were one of our leaders. You were our leader for Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert Program back in the day, like what, over 800 teachers, I think you were overseeing. You had
about
a lot of work.
850. Yeah.
Victoria's presented at ISTE, at FETC, at IDE. I mean, she's been everywhere, man. And right now, oh no, I wanted to mention that she was one of the top 10 most visionary leaders in education in CIO Look magazine. She was one of the top 30 K-12 IT influencers by EdTech magazine and one of the ISTE top 20 to watch just a couple years ago. So Victoria is here to talk to us today about the importance of AI and learning about it, and why should we learn about it? I mean, watching social media right now, Victoria, I find even myself with my seasoned eye going, is that real?
Right. Yeah.
So tell us.
Sure. Well, before I go ahead and get started, I want to say thank you, Tammy, so much for having me here. Thank you, NCCE, for bringing me back home. And then I also want to point out, since, my dog was in the promo photo, he is actually here. So Red is here as well. So if you see his little ears pop up, he always just loves being part of the action is the best way that I can describe it. So he's here hanging out with us. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So give me just one moment. All right, this is the small one. And then now I'm going to make it nice and big. Tammy, can you just let me know if you see it, if it looks okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're here today to talk a little bit about the value of media literacy and just what it looks like utilizing artificial intelligence. And I'd feel remiss if I started this without going into the difference between information literacy and media literacy. This is not a full list. Obviously, there's much more to it. But what I wanted to do was really highlight just 3 main pain points for each one. Because sometimes people conflate information literacy and media literacy and vice versa. And I just wanted to make sure that we had what I refer to as the cold hard facts. So if I take a look at information literacy, the definition of information literacy is that this is the ability to identify that there is a need for information, and we're locating and evaluating and using that information effectively in order for us to solve a problem. Information literacy means that we know where to go whenever we need to do something. We can locate that information, we can evaluate it effectively, and we can use this information effectively. Effectively is definitely the operative word here, right? Because we can see information online, but we might not necessarily know how to put it to good use or how to use it effectively. Information literacy also involves understanding where to find information and also how to evaluate it and use it effectively. So what I think, I always joke, back in the 1900s, I would be in the library, because when I was growing up, they were not media centers, they were libraries. Love my media centers, love my libraries, but I knew the difference between when to go to the encyclopedia, when to go to the atlas, when to go to the dictionary, when to go to the thesaurus. So it just involves understanding where to find that information, how to evaluate it, and then how I'm using it effectively. And also, what am I using it for? And then information literacy is also somewhat related to library science as a discipline. So like when you go to a library and you speak to librarians, they have their masters in library science. They have advanced degrees. Information literacy is a huge discipline. When we kick it over to media literacy, this is a little bit more broad because information literacy specifically references the information. Media literacy is about everything that we see. So media literacy is the ability to access, evaluate, manipulate, and produce media in a variety of forms. So the difference between information and media for me, like the big piece, is it's not just the access and the location. It's also how am I producing and how am I manipulating and how am I also observing how this media is being manipulated. So here is a good example that is very relevant. I might upset some fans here, but I'm here for it. I can take the criticism. So Taylor Swift just released an album, right? Life of a Showgirl. She has recently surpassed Adele, right, for the number of albums that were sold for like a release. And this is huge news that's going on right now. However, when I take a look at what's going on with Taylor Swift versus what's going on with Adele, again, both great albums, both great people, I'm looking at Taylor Swift's is streaming, right? There are multiple different versions of the album that are being released. There are also multiple fans that are buying multiple versions of this album. Whereas if we look at Adele, who released the album about a decade ago, you didn't really see a bunch of fans buying multiple versions because there were no multiple versions. You know, Adele released one version of that album. There were multiple people buying one version of that album versus multiple people buying multiple versions of one album. So it's about what the media is producing and also how we're receiving that content there. That's the media literacy. On top of that, this is also about how media works and also how really media is produced. How are we receiving content? How are we understanding how content is being delivered to us? And then also, media literacy is more related to the media industry than library science. It's about media content. And then there's also that really big social effect impact there. So there's that big social impact. So information literacy truly is about how are we identifying that information? How are we locating it? How are we evaluating it? That media literacy is how are we processing it? How does media work? How does media produce different things and certain things? And how are we accessing all of that? So there's a lot of different moving pieces here. But when I think about media literacy and information literacy in the age of artificial intelligence, it all kind of kicks back to learning theory. So this should look familiar to everybody. And if you're just listening right now, if you can't see the slides, this is what I refer to as that old school Bloom's taxonomy. So old school Bloom's taxonomy, it's that triangle, kind of looks like the food pyramid if we were to take it back in the day. And it essentially lets us know how we learn as adults, as learners, as kids, as everybody, all the way down from remembering at the bottom of the rung of the triangle to create, which is all the way up at the top of the triangle. So it goes in order from remember to understand, to apply, to analyze, to evaluate, and to create. And all of these steps essentially let us know that, hey, we have to start from the bottom before we get up to the top. And now that I'm at CDW working, as Tammy said, as kind of like a strategist, right? Like I work in a lot of design areas, helping folks understand different parts of education. I need to be able to remember, and I've always had to be able to remember, right? Like certain parts of education and what it's like to be in education and how it's like to work around a budget and what it's like to work around students and work with students before I even get to the space where I create something. So if I were to even take this outside of education, right, looking at the remember stage, remember says that we need to be able to recall facts and basic concepts. So I go to Hawaii a lot, both for personal and also for a convention that I attend every year. Remember means that we need to be able to recall facts and basic concepts. So I can recall the letters of the Hawaiian alphabet, right? I remember what those are. Because I remember the letters of the Hawaiian alphabet, I can understand, which is the next level, bits and pieces of Hawaiian. Because I can understand bits and pieces of Hawaiian, then I can apply, which is the next level up, these types of information and little bits and pieces of the conversation in things like conversations with other folks, or maybe I'm interpreting different types of information. I'm not quite at the analyze state yet, or the evaluate state, or the create state, but I'm confident that I will get there one day. However, here's what I am going to say. This Bloom's taxonomy, I think, absolutely still has merit. However, we need to think about this in the context of not just technology, but also artificial intelligence. Because what does remembering mean when we have something like this in our pockets all the time? Right? What does remembering mean when we work at a school that is one-to-one with devices? Recalling facts and basic concepts doesn't really hold the same value anymore when we're constantly having these search engines and now artificial intelligence that can create things for us here. So when I think about recalling facts and basic concepts, right, if I didn't know the letters of the Hawaiian alphabet, I could easily look it up. And technically that's still remembering, but also not really at the same time, right? So even though, like I said, I believe that this Bloom's taxonomy has merit, what I love about what was just released via Oregon State University, their eCampus, is that they came out with Bloom's taxonomy revisited. And I live and breathe by this when it comes to positives and pitfalls of using artificial intelligence, right? Before we even get into the ethics conversation, before we even get into, is it cheating? Before we even get into any of that stuff, we've got to get into the why, right? Why are we using artificial intelligence and how is this impacting us as a learner? So Bloom's taxonomy revisited essentially says that we've got these distinctive human skills that will never be taken away from technology. And then we also have how this generative AI can really help supplement and support our learning here. So you'll notice that if you take a look, everything is still there. We've got remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But then the difference is, instead of it being that triangle, we've kind of got like a square with two columns. And as I mentioned, one column is that distinctive human skills. The other column is how the generative AI can help supplement that learning. So if I were to kind of kick it back to old school Bloom's, which I will right now, taking a look at remember. All remember says here is that to remember something, you need to be able to recall facts and basic concepts. These are things like defining things, duplicating things, listing things, memorizing, blah, 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 right? Let's kick it over to new Bloom's. If I look at the new remember, underneath a distinctive human skill, remembering now means that I need to be able to recall information in situations where technology is not readily accessible. So think of how powerful that is, right? If I don't have my phone, if I don't have my Chromebook or my Surface or my iPad or my tablet or my whatever, I need to be able to recall information in situations where technology is not accessible. So if somebody were to duct tape me to my wall right now and ask me how many letters are in the Hawaiian alphabet, I can look at them and I can say there are 12 letters in the Hawaiian alphabet. And again, that's not me using technology. That is me using my brain. However, what I don't know, right? Because these are all things that I, recall whenever I'm out and about there. I don't know how the Hawaiian alphabet got formed. I don't know how certain words get formed, right? So this is how generative AI can be helpful for me here. And that's where that generative AI can help supplement learning. So looking off to the right-hand side of that table underneath of remember, how generative AI can help supplement that learning. It can help you retrieve different types of factual information. It can help you list possible answers. It can help you define terms. It can help you construct basic timelines, chronologies, and things like that, right? So we're still absolutely the humans behind the screens. However, we also have that supplemental learning aspect that generative AI can help support. If I were to kick it up all the way to create, right? So that's like the highest level of Bloom's. Underneath of distinctive human skills, it says that for create, we're engaging in both creative and cognitive processes that leverage human lived experiences, social emotional interactions, intuition, reflections, things like that, right? So this might be, if I decide, again, taking it in a bit of a different direction, let's say that down here, because I live in Orlando, Florida, I'm interacting with a couple of different folks and we decide to create a podcast together, right? That's our creativity coming through. This is our human skill. This is the creative and cognitive process. However, let's say that we want to create a podcast, but we don't know how to get started. We don't know what we want to talk about. We have a very loose idea of topics, but we're stuck. So how the generative AI can help support the learning in that stage. It can help support the brainstorming process. It can suggest a range of alternatives. It can give you some drawbacks. It can give you advantages. It can describe real world cases. It can give you different types of deliverables there. So from the human side and then also the learning side, we've got options here. But what I really want to highlight is that they all help each other work together. The key, though, is making sure that y'all are utilizing it to where you feel comfortable. I feel like at times people feel as though the artificial intelligence should overtake the human skill, and then also vice versa. But really, at the end of the day, these two things work together, and we're never going to lose that human element behind the screen. So speaking of what that human element looks like, what I'm going to do is stop sharing this. I'm going to go ahead and go to one of my preferred AI engines. It's taken just a second to come up, but here we are. All right. Should be good now. So I'm on Copilot. I do use a combination of Copilot, ChatGPT, and Gemini whenever I do something. But I just wanted to go ahead and showcase this. So just to kind of, again, show you the power of what it looks like to be utilizing artificial intelligence. And one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm utilizing AI, again, that human skill that's alongside that AI skill, is just using it for administrative tasks, right? So what does it look like to actually create something within an AI chatbot? You can also use AI alongside different types of features and functions, but primarily and honestly, a lot of what I do is just kind of located right within here. So I just wanted to show y'all an example of, again, that Bloom's taxonomy revisited, what it would look like here. And one of the activities that I actually do with my students is we do something called bad resume. So when you're a kid, right, when you're in middle school, high school, elementary school, they don't really have resumes all that much. But, you're kind of bolstering up, what you're doing for volunteering. You're also bolstering up what you're doing if you're in high school, you're looking for internships, or, you're applying for college, career, military, whatever. You might not really know what a resume looks like. And if you're tuning in right now, we're likely all adults that have really good resumes because we're professionals. But when you're 14, 15, 16, if you're looking online, the templates usually aren't that great. It's usually something from like 1997 that's ripped from Google Images. Or if you're trying to get a resume from somebody else, you might have a resume from someone who's so accomplished and you don't really know where to begin. So we actually do this activity together. And we start by saying, okay, what do you want to be when you get older, right? So that distinctive human skill is going to be, let's create a resume. Like that's the highest we're going to be creating. But we have to remember what we want to do, what our accomplishments are, and how we want to take them to that next level. So let's say that I want to be in my dreams, right? My wildest dreams, a pastry chef. So I'm going to say, please. And I always start my prompts with please, y'all, because when the robots come, I'm a very big believer in this. When the robots come, they're going to remember who said please, who didn't say please. So I always start with please. So please write a poorly written resume for a high school student who wants to become a pastry chef. They have experience working in fast food and interning at a bakery. So again, and I'm going to make this just a tad bit bigger. That way we can see it. I try to make it as specific as possible. So this is a high school student where they know what they want to do. They know what they think that their end goal is going to be. They're not exactly sure what it's going to look like. So what we do is we do, again, this bad resume. And bad resume essentially creates a horrible resume for the student. So here's a deliberately poorly written resume for a high school student aspiring to be a pastry chef. It is full of formatting issues, vague descriptions, grammar mistakes, and lacks professionalism. So it gives that context there. Even just a quick glance, you can see this resume is pretty darn awful, right? The objective, terrible. The education, not definitive, which again is fine, but notice how it says not sure, maybe 2026. It gives some work experience for fast food, but the objectives and also the bullet points are not too great. Skills are not great. Awards are not great. References also not too great. So again, even when you're 14, 15, 16, the kids can look at this and say, this is not fantastic. So again, that's from that remembering to that create, we're analyzing it. So it's now asking, let me know if you want to turn this into a better version or make a funny cover letter. Let's turn this into a better version. And that's what we actually do with the students. So I'm going to say, please turn this into a better version. So we are wanting to make this a little bit more professional. And you'll notice automatically this is miles better than what we had. We have an actual email, right? We have an actual objective. We have actual education. We have experience that has dates and locations. We've got actual skills. We've got awards and recognitions, all of that stuff. So again, from the remember all the way down to the create, then what we do is we have a conversation about it and we talk about it together. Even though this is not them, right? We just put in some arbitrary information. We have a conversation about how do we make a decent resume? What does a resume look like? And how could we possibly use generative AI in order for us to get from point A to point B? So we like to utilize this activity as like a starter. And even if you work alongside faculty and staff, I do find this to be really helpful as well, because again, we're all professionals. We all have resumes. So this is a nice way to showcase the power of artificial intelligence and how it can aid in different types of learning. Last piece of the puzzle that I wanted to share, and if y'all could drop the link into the chat box, that would be awesome, is this link from Purdue University. I say they, let me back up. So this is their School of Libraries and School of Information Studies, Purdue OWL. They are an amazing rockin' resource when it comes to different types of citations. I do get questions quite a bit just as to how to cite artificial intelligence, how we can be good stewards in using AI properly. And they actually just released some guidance with how to cite AI generated content alongside different types of AI tools, different types of AI for research, different types of resources for educators, prompt design, AI and ethics. It's all here. But they do have information as to how to cite AI generated content in not only APA, but also MLA and Chicago style. So highly, highly, highly recommend that you check that out. But yeah, lots of really neat stuff, lots of cool things going on. When I think about the positives of artificial intelligence, again, it all comes from being that human behind the screen, being that person that is doing the work. When I think about the pitfalls, it honestly comes from not being the person behind the screen. If I just look at artificial intelligence as a way to get work done, but I'm still not checking, that's a bit of a pitfall for me. But that's why, again, kicking it back to that Bloom's taxonomy revisited, we've got those distinctive human skills, and then we also have how that generative AI can help supplement our learning. With those two hand in hand, we are golden. All right.
That was amazing. That was just like it reminds me of, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Washington State Office of the Superintendent.
Oh yeah, OSPI, yeah.
Right, the human-centered approach, like has to start with human inquiry, and then you use the AI, and then it ends with human empowerment. Yes. And I just love how the Bloom's taxonomy, the one that you've got, the revisited one, just absolutely encompasses that. I just think that's terrific. I've not seen that before. How long ago did that come out?
Yeah, so this came out in 2024. I want to say maybe like spring area, because I remember last year for NCCE, Greg Bagby, because he and we always do a session together. I brought this up during one of our sessions. So it's fairly new. I would say about a year old, or maybe even less than a year now that I think about it. But yeah, it's awesome. It's such a neat resource.
It is. We did have a question, and I saw you were using Copilot. But what are your recommendations for using reliable AI? Because we know, the reliability of AI depends on who's doing the coding behind the screen, right?
Right.
So what are your recommendations for either sussing out the best ones, or do you have, obviously you showcased Copilot, so you must.
Yeah, so I will say I am a little more biased toward Copilot because that's like the license that I personally have. However, I do use a combination of ChatGPT, Gemini, and Copilot, and I feel like those are pretty much the big three. Whenever I talk to folks about what they're using. However, if you haven't ventured into AI yet, or if you're kind of interested in venturing into AI, I'm going to go share this real quick. And you should see it in just a moment. And it's Goblin Tools. So this is a really neat one. Tammy, have you heard of Goblin yet?
I have not. Tell me more.
Oh, you're gonna love it. So Goblin rocks. Goblin is like if you were to take ChatGPT, Copilot, and Gemini, but like it breaks it down into like small, reasonable things. Because one of the things that I hear from people is like, when you go to Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT, it's a chatbot that just opens up with, tell me what you want to do. And you're like, I don't know, right? Like, what do you want me to do? I don't know. So yeah. Goblin actually breaks it down into a collection of small tools for when things feel too big or complicated. So like if you have in your head that you want to do a to-do list, you can click magic to do. If you have in your head that like you got an email from a parent and you're like, they really just say that to me, then you can click on judge, right? And then it will read the text for emotion. Like if you have in your head that you need help deciding something, then it will help decide. They also even have a section for teacher tools. I'll be honest, I have not played around with these all too much because they are fairly new, but I am excited to dive into them. But like, let's go to Magic To Do, for example. I give this example a lot. I'm going to remove it. I'm going to do it again. Whenever I present, because I've got a good girlfriend who's getting married soon and we're all very excited for her, but she's always been that friend and she admits it. So I don't feel weird saying it. She's the kind of person who will like show up late or like always forget things. So when we received the save the date in the mail, it didn't really have any information. So we called her and we said, hey, we're so excited for you to get married, but like there's a date, but no location, no venue. Like, do you have a registry? Like what am I supposed to wear? And she didn't really put a lot of thought into that. So after she lovingly asked me if I could plan the wedding, and I said no, because I've already planned my wedding, so I don't need to do that again. But I was like, let's put it through Goblin through the to-do list. So like, let's say, please plan a wedding for 50 people. Let's make it in Asheville, North Carolina. So this is the list, right? This is the prompt that I put in.
Okay.
This wand right here, essentially what I'm asking it to do is break down the item. So what it's doing right now is that it's thinking, and then you'll see that now it's everything that she has to do. So choose a date for the wedding, select a budget, book the venue, decide on the wedding theme, hire a wedding planner, create the guest list, right? Like plan or organize the music if you need to, do the transportation, plan the seating. And all of it was just from that prompt. And then if we need even more information, the more that you keep selecting that one, the more it breaks it down. So like, I'm thinking of like a floral arrangements, right? Let's check that one. So what might it mean to arrange for floral arrangements and decorations? So determine the overall theme, select the floral design, choose the flower type, right? Like all of these things. So if I were to go to Gemini, ChatGPT, or Copilot, I could say create da-da-da-da-da, but it might feel a little bit more intimidating. So for my folks who are just kind of starting out with AI, I always send them to Goblin first. I'm like, Goblin is like a precursor to all the other stuff. And even though I use all the other stuff, I still go to Goblin quite a bit for stuff like that.
I have never seen that before. And that's incredible.
It's
just
cool.
The way it generated it and then dove down.
Right.
And it's actually a pretty good list.
I'll delete this. And then, so that's like a non-school example, obviously. But what I'm thinking about working with students, especially because I come from like the middle school, high school arena, you might have a student with an IEP or 504 where it says, okay, student creates or teacher creates a task list, which is fine. But, when you're 14 or 15 or 13 or even 10, some of that gradual release of responsibility needs to go on to them. So we've actually been utilizing Goblin with students to just kickstart that executive function. So we can say something like let's say that a student is trying to write a paper on the moons of Jupiter. So please help me get started. Get started with 3 ways to research the moons of Jupiter for a 1,000 word paper that I have to write. Again, just random, right? But if I were to go ahead and break it down, right? So here's what I would need to do as a student. I need to identify those resources. I need to look for recent studies, and then I need to take notes. And that's a way for me to start. And then after I start, then I can begin to write my paper.
Wow. That's incredible. I've never seen this before. And I'm pretty sure most of our viewers have not. So thank you for introducing us to a new available tool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Honestly, we need to see you at the conference, Victoria, presenting on AI.
Yes. Well,
right?
For those of you listening, I was telling Tammy earlier. So last year I couldn't make it because of work, which was a bummer. The year before I couldn't make it because I had some family challenges. My aunt had passed away, and then my maternal grandmother was really sick, and then she passed away. But this year, I am going to specifically block off time. I don't care if I have to take off time, PTO, whatever, because it's also right around my mother's birthday. So if I can kind of find a way to like roll it in to make it a vacation for my mom too, I think that my mom would really like that. And I'm sure my mom would also like to meet y'all too. She's
that's
a
awesome.
total people person. She loves.
Gotta be wonderful. Is your mom?
Yeah.
Right. And she'll look. Seattle in late February is gorgeous. And that's where the conference is, everybody, February 25 to 27.
Yeah.
And the
back in Seattle this year. Yeah.
Link is down below, and it's you can go and register and take a look at. We've got a great keynote. Bush was coming, and it's going to be a great conference. So be sure you sign up for that, Victoria. Thank you. It was so wonderful when I reached out to Victoria and asked if she would be willing to be on the show. She said, "I'd do anything for you in NCC.
Anything for you in NCC. Yes.
Come to the conference."
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, and thank you for bringing Ren. It was so great to see Ren live.
Yes. Yeah. Anytime.
Give Courtney a hug.
I will, definitely.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us live from NCCE with the amazing, the one, the only Victoria Thompson. We will see you next month with another great speaker. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.